I have a tongue twister of a name, Aura Lee McLenar, and I'll just tell you a little bit about me. So I have been in the mental health, behavioral health field for about 27 years now, and always worked in mental health. Started out in Kobacker, child and adolescent psychiatry, and I'm like, I think I'm going to check out and walk away from all my education. And anyhow, switched over to adult behavioral health, worked at Fremont Memorial for about 12 years, and then I've been with Mercy now for about 15 years, and always seem to have worked with trauma. So lots of trauma training and expertise, and work with a team of 9. We have a great program over at St. V's, and we do bedside behavioral health and therapy with a lot of the trauma patients that you all, thank goodness, rescue, and they end up being admitted in the Level 1 Trauma Center over there at St. V's. And we do some bedside work with them, trying to help ward off PTSD post-discharge for them. As you know, getting rescued sometimes is actually psychologically traumatizing for these patients. So we do a lot of bedside work and help the patients that seem to be a little bit more vulnerable with that. So my hope tonight is to just kind of have some good conversation and nothing real formal feeling, hopefully. If you guys have any comments or anything you would like to add, please feel free to just throw something at me, speak up, wave a hand, and I would love to hear from you guys as we talk about some of these topics. I'm sure that other people sitting here might benefit from things that you have to share as well. So I don't have all of the answers, but I will say that a lot of the things that I'm sharing with you are things that I've also had to apply to myself and my colleagues as well. We don't deal with the medical trauma up front like you all do. And God love you for doing that, because we hear so many great things with what you do, and it's so appreciated, I should say, by the patients that you serve. But we take in and day out the psychological aspect of things, and it can get a little stressful, and we can also be very, very vulnerable and susceptible to burnout as well. So just going to share some things with you, and as you could tell from the wonderful flyer that Sean created, we're going to cover recognizing signs of stress, burnout, and PTSD. I'm sure you guys probably know this already, could probably talk about it blindfolded with one hand behind your back, right? We're going to talk about mental health awareness and first responders, practical coping and resilient strategies, and resources for ongoing support. So I didn't want to start out with a downer, but I thought, there's not really any way around this except to talk a little bit about some of the data that's out there. You get a little bit of conflicting data depending on the sites that you look at, but as you know, first responders, especially police, fire, EMS, have significantly higher baseline rates, okay, of depression, up to 37% for paramedics and 15% for all first responders. Around 11 to 24% suffer from PTSD, suicidal ideation, and that's up to about 47% lifetime compared to people in the general public. And then some data suggests that EMS personnel have a suicide risk tenfold higher. That's pretty high. That's significant. Tenfold higher than regular citizens. Firefighters are more likely to die by suicide, which is so sad, than in the line of duty. And it was interesting, as Sean had mentioned, as I was pulling some of this data and putting this PowerPoint together, I did see it pop up on Facebook, you know, the trooper, the Ohio State trooper that suicided, and I thought, that is so sad. And what we want to do is, by talking about this, we really just want to increase our awareness, right? The more smarter we are, the wiser we are about this, the better we're going to be able to ward off things for ourselves and also for our coworkers. So a few things here. There's a strong stigma out there. We know that for police officers, first responders, anybody in the medical field, honestly, and even veterans regarding getting help for mental health issues. Some believe that seeking help, might lead to them losing their job. Some people have a view that it means I'm going to be viewed as being weaker, I'm not tough enough, my reputation professionally might get impacted. So there's an overall perceived weakness, I still think, that is out there. Many first responders feel that seeking help might mean that, they could even potentially lose their job. There's a little bit of fear of that. I put a quote in the middle here on this blue tab that says, first responders have the most stressful and high-risk job in the United States. I do believe that's true. And I think you all should be the highest paid. Sorry, I have no control over that. Traumatic events such as active shooters, civil unrest, physical assault, wildfires, pandemics, political issues, DV, calls, to name a few, are dramatically on the rise. And we know that social demise is kind of on the rise, isn't it? Anybody go through a drive-through lately and just like want a cup of coffee and they're like, meow, right? People are just like stressed. I mean, people are stressed. It's tough out there. There's just a lot brewing and going on in our world at large, and I think it impacts everything from frontline responders, the work that we do, rescuing people, working with people in healthcare, all the way down, throughout the country. So that adds, there's just an edge, I think, that adds to the overall stress for the day-to-day living, with our jobs and what we do. That quote came from a conference that took place in 21 where there was 175 first responder personnel that were doing a training on resiliency and PTSD and depression with first responders. So I'm trying to think of the things that are going to be most beneficial to you. So in these blocks here that you're going to see on the slide, I just kind of wanted to share with you the potential progression of what can happen from the overall accumulative impact of responding to traumatic events over time. So even though the event may be over, some people tell me this, that you might now be experiencing or may experience later some strong emotional or physical reactions. Following that, it's very common or actually very normal for people to experience emotional aftershocks following traumatic events. After that, sometimes the emotional aftershocks or the stress reactions appear immediately after the event. Sometimes they might appear a few hours or a few days later, in some cases weeks, months, or even down the road into a year before the stress reactions appear. The signs and symptoms of a stress reaction may last a few days, a few weeks, a few months, and occasionally it could be longer, depending on the severity of the events. Now, I put this little progression of things up there as a potential. It doesn't mean that, on all of the calls when you respond, everybody's going to have these big acute stress reactions. But I put that up there because I think this is a nice, practical, and realistic thing to just be aware of how the impact and the toll on a day-to-day basis, week after week and months and into years of doing the kind of work that you do can actually build up, and people can start to have some of these reactions. And as you all know, and you're the experts in your field with what you do, some scenes that you go to are much, much more severe and critical, and they could be much more triggering, causing some acute stress type reactions for you depending, on the scene and what takes place. So again, we're just really increasing our awareness. We're being aware of what potentially could happen, because you guys are going to be smart and learn how to outsmart all this, right? So that the toll of this and the impact of this never really does catch up with you. So recognizing signs of stress and burnout, I am not going to insult your intelligence and tell you what stress is. We all know what that is. We're going to talk a little bit, though, about some of the bigger symptoms to look for. So I broke this down a little bit for you emotionally, behaviorally, cognitively, and then physically. So with emotional, a lot of people will say that, when they're just, stress has been building, it's been rattling the cage for a while, knocking at the door, and people start to say, I'm just like, starting to get irritable, starting to get angry. I just kind of feel overwhelmed. Some people start to feel a little bit of hopelessness. They just kind of lose their overall joy. Behaviorally, they might withdraw from their loved ones. They might also have increased risk-taking behavior. Some people just start to drop out of life a little bit when it comes to self-care. It's like, don't care so much, don't care about diet or exercise, the basic things about getting good rest. Their motivation to do that just kind of starts to tank. Cognitively, they just might start to have difficulty concentrating, some difficulty with, making decisions. You might have been able to, in the past, could just, make decisions, and some people who are starting to really roll into burnout will say, I don't get it early. All of a sudden, it's like, simple things. I can't make my mind up. I'm just like struggling a little bit. And then you might start to notice a little bit of hypervigilance in your behavior. You're kind of startling a little bit easier. You just kind of, you're on guard. You're just kind of waiting for something bad to happen. And then physical, all kinds of things. It could be honestly, anything with your health could start to be impacted. So I will tell you that I did have personal experience with burnout. I worked 5 years at Kobacker Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, And then I rolled into 12 years nonstop of adult psychiatric care, and I was doing nothing but trauma work. It was on an outpatient basis. We were working on productivity. This was at Fremont Memorial. This is no, slam to Fremont Memorial, but it was a great mental health team I worked with. But I will tell you that I didn't have the greatest supervision or leadership over me. Hindsight is everything, because I really did hit a wall of burnout. And for like 12 years straight, I was just like case after case. I was seeing five to seven people a day. You do hour sessions with people who share their trauma and their drama with you, and it's like, oh, it starts to really take a toll. And all of a sudden there were things like, my husband was like, man, I just want my wife back. Or I would get ticked off when my phone would ring. I didn't want to talk to people. So, it was very real for me. So even from that mental health frontline work, doing a lot of psychological work with people, I kind of got beat up a little bit, and I actually considered for a while walking away from all of my education and my career, and I thought, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I just want to go, I'm a coffee nut, so I thought, I'm going to go run a Starbucks. I'm going to go make chinos all day. I just want to make coffee. And then I thought, no, that won't work, because people are just going to want to come up and buy a coffee and tell you all their problems anyway, right? So just kidding there. But just wanted to share that with you to let you know that I actually get this. And this has been pretty helpful for me, especially working over at St. V's. I've had ER docs come in, and some of the frontline workers come in, and they're like, you just have a few minutes, can I come in and talk? And they'll plop down and they'll just break down. And some people who are especially ER physicians, the stuff that they take in, down in the ED daily over at St. V's is pretty intense. And these things will start to creep in, and we talk about it. And I think there should be more trainings like this, for our ER docs and nurses and everybody, the whole team, to help them ward off stuff like this, or to talk to somebody who's been there and who has actually experienced potential burnout and maybe almost walked away, from their career, because I think that sharing the reality of that, we can help each other out a little bit. So I would say also, when it comes to burnout, you'll hear people say, or you will start to feel it if you've ever been there, or maybe you're there now, or maybe, you've got somebody who's dealing with it. They'll say something like this, man, I got nothing left. Or they'll start to feel like, I'm just running on fumes. And you'll start to notice like their ability to tolerate the little things, their patience kind of goes out the window. So those are just warning signs, for all of us, and things that we can help look out for our team members. So I liked this definition, and I just put this up here. Sorry, I'm just going to read it to you, but I really appreciated this definition. And it said, first responder burnout is a severe chronic, so it's ongoing stress condition. It's from constant exposure to trauma and high pressure situations. That's definitely what you all deal with, isn't it? Leading to emotional exhaustion, cynicism, which is like depersonalization, and reduced accomplishment, significantly impacting mental and physical health with high risks of depression, PTSD, sometimes substance abuse, sometimes suicidal thoughts. Key signs include extreme fatigue, sleep issues, irritability, withdrawal, poor focus, with stigma often preventing help seeking, despite high demand for accessible, specialized support like therapy and peer groups. That's a pretty inclusive definition, isn't it? Sorry for it to be so wordy, but I thought, that's kind of the best. I can't even speak to that. That just kind of is all inclusive, and it really wraps up in a nutshell what true burnout, in my opinion, is, and what I've heard from other people. So I also think that in, the line of work of first responder, police, fire, you name it, mental health folks, ER folks, sometimes PTSD is talked about almost too loosely, or there's such an assumption that everybody's going to get PTSD because you work in this field. Well, it's not really necessarily true. The precursor and the things to watch out for are the accumulation of stress over time that doesn't get released, vented, let go of, and starts to build, because then your next step is the burnout. And I just wanted to clarify PTSD a little bit. It's kind of like I don't know if anybody here has ever had a migraine. You ever had a migraine? And I'm sure everybody here has had a headache, right? Well, I remember the first time I ever had a migraine, I thought I was literally dying. went to the ER, couldn't stop vomiting. And I thought, oh, I used to think I had migraines. This is a migraine. And I'm sharing that because it's kind of like, once you've had a migraine, you're like, dude, I know what a migraine is, and there's no mistaking it. PTSD is kind of the same thing. And I think sometimes, you know how in the mental health field, people will loosely use the term bipolar. Oh, she's bipolar, or oh, he's bipolar. Very often that's misdiagnosed. It's a very overrated disorder and misused a lot, frequently misdiagnosed, even by psychiatry, believe it or not. People actually don't have it. There's other issues, but they really don't have true bipolar. Well, not everybody also who works as a first responder gets PTSD, but if you have it, you're going to know it. You know, so if you're ever sitting back or you talk to a buddy and they're like, I'm wondering if I got PTSD, they pretty much know, or you pretty much know if you've got it, because it's intense. It's not just stress, and it's not just burnout. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the brain with actual PTSD, and I wanted to kind of clarify that for people a little bit today. So the big thing to remember with actual PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is there are intrusive symptoms, and what that means is that I can't shut this off. And a lot of that means there are, at a minimum, there's flashbacks, there's nightmares, there's an exaggerated startle response, there's a hypervigilance that you can't control. And then because of those physiological symptoms, and they're genuine, they're not just made up in your head, you're not just imagining this, they're legit things happening within your physiological system. But because of that, there then is an avoidance reaction that takes place within you to do anything and everything in your power to not get triggered, because you don't want to feel those symptoms. They are that intense. So avoidance happens, you start to stay away from people, places, or things that could potentially trigger you, because you're like, dude, the last time I was there, or the last time I went to this, flashbacks, it was hitting me, and I didn't like it, and I could not control it. That's PTSD. It's legit, it's very real, and it's very intense. Mood can be impacted, cognition. There's a lot of guilt and shame that goes with it. A lot of people who have PTSD also have a fear that they're literally going crazy. Have you ever heard of phrenolophobia? It's a fear of going crazy. It's kind of like when you have panic attacks, people, they really think, I am losing it. I'm literally going off the deep end. So they have a legit fear of going crazy. Sometimes people with true, legitimate PTSD also, it's that intense. There's stuff going on in their brain and physiologically that they cannot control. So they have a fear that I'm literally slipping off the deep end here. And then overall there's a hyperarousal taking place within the central nervous system. And we talked about some of that. So not to get too clinical on you, but I wanted to clarify also and help people understand. I'm a really big believer, because I've done a lot of therapy with people over the years. A lot of people will come into therapy just very, very uneducated and misinformed. And I always tell people, you know what, if you have knowledge and full understanding about what it is you have, whether it's bipolar disorder, PTSD, maybe OCD, you name it, panic disorder, whatever, an anxiety disorder, the more knowledge you have about it, I always say, hey, two smart people, right? We'll work together. We put our heads together. We will learn how to outsmart this and help you overcome it. It's the same thing with PTSD. So I'm just going to spend 2 slides here on PTSD. I think it's worthy, and you guys are worthy of me talking a little bit about it, because I don't know that you're going to get exposure like this about PTSD anywhere else other than reading it. And I think this will kind of hit home, and it will help you. If you don't ever struggle with it, you can talk about it as a team with your colleagues, and you might be able to help somebody recognize it a little bit and help direct them to get some help. So kind of in a nutshell, if it's PTSD, some people will be, part of that fear of kind of losing it or going crazy is they're like, I can't remember some of the things that have happened. Did I make this up? This is feeling so crazy cognitively and physiologically that I'm kind of wondering if I'm making it up. There's some legitimate reasons that that's happening, and I'll talk to you in a minute about that. Wanted to let you know that brain scan research is helping us understand in the mental health field a lot more about trauma and the fact that there are actually missing memories and fragmented recollection when PTSD is legitimately happening. We don't remember trauma the way we remember the way we remember other events. Traumatic memory is very different. So for example, say as a first responder, I almost feel like I don't want to insult anybody because I consider what all you do is probably so traumatic a lot. And with all due respect to that, I'll just use this as an example. Maybe you responded, maybe you and your partner responded to something where it was extra traumatic, okay? Out of all due respect to what you guys deal with. The kind of event to where you walked away and it was like, oh man, I can't shake this. And you know that it like deeply, deeply impacted you. And to the point of where when you walk away from it, it's like, I can't get away from it. And you start to be rattled, have some of those symptoms I talked about. You're triggered a little bit. You have maybe flashbacks. Maybe you have some nightmares or dreams about it. You know, the memory of that is very different because of how it affects the brain. And so when we're exposed to something where maybe even you as a first responder, you witnessed death or you were exposed very closely to it yourself, what happens is the amygdala, which is, you know, centered in, here's the brain, the amygdala is tucked in here. What they say happens is that what we took in or viewed was so traumatic that the prefrontal cortex of the brain kind of shuts down. And the experience of that takes place in the amygdala. And then so from there, as you move on, you know, you're trying to remember and think up here. You know, the prefrontal cortex allows us to talk to people in narrative ways and to tell stories and to recall and everything. When PTSD happens to us, that prefrontal cortex up here, it just shuts down. It's like, it just checked out on you. So as you're trying to move forward and do your work, you know, just do your duties, do day-to-day life with your family, your spouse, whatever, your kids, you know, this narrative functioning portion of your brain has been impacted and triggers happen, and then all of a sudden you go to this fight or flight reaction. So that might be a little too deep for what you wanted to know, but I just kind of wanted to share a little bit of that with you to help you realize that it's very, very sharp, you know, and I commend Sean and all of you for being so concerned, you know, about wanting to learn these things because, again, my goal is to help you walk away from here saying, yeah, there's some real risks for us. Doesn't mean we're going to have any of it happen to us, but the smarter and wiser you are about what to look out for and for your colleagues, the better off you're going to be because the sooner you're on it, we can kick this to the curb and help it stay away. So final slide here. So like I said, instead of the memory from the thing that traumatized you the most being up here in the prefrontal cortex, it's happening in a different portion of the brain that is tucked away and buried. And so you can't recall things. You aren't losing it. It's because it was so traumatic that it doesn't want to process the way other normal day-to-day memories happen. So in a nutshell then with PTSD, the bottom line here on this slide is what happened long ago does not feel like it's over. So it's a true physiological, very, very real thing. So if you've got a buddy who's struggling with PTSD, that's what's going on with them. It's truly a brain thing. There is help for it. People can get restored and completely kick this to the curb and get over it, but you have to help, you know, them realize, and you have to realize if it's you, that you aren't losing it, but the reason that you keep getting triggered is because the way that the prefrontal cortex shut down, when you are exposed to something that reminds you of the very bad thing, your brain starts to tell you that, oh, it's happening right now. Does that make sense? So anyhow, I hope that was a little bit helpful. Was that too much, or is that helpful to know? Okay, good. So hard to know what, you know, what people want and how deep you want to be, but hopefully that was a little bit helpful for you. So I wanted to show this picture. So unresolved emotional trauma is very much like this iceberg. You know, and this is for anybody, you know, and I work with a team of 9, and we're always checking on each other. We do nothing but trauma work, psychological trauma work, and you ought to see our unit. We've got, in the back of our unit, we've got a whole wing over there at St. V's, a lot of outpatient, inpatient work we're doing, but in the back, we've got a fun spot where we've got puzzles going on. We just have some silly, crazy stuff that we do, and we check on each other, and we can always tell if somebody took in some, pretty traumatic stuff. We also work with victims of crime. So we hear a lot of stories about domestic violence and, things that most people don't want to hear about. So we have to do a lot of this stuff so that stuff underneath the iceberg, we aren't putting it in our backpack and throwing it over our shoulder and going home with it every day and then impacting the rest of our family. We have gotten really skilled at taking care of ourselves and getting rid of things so that it doesn't destroy us. All right, so some differences here and overlaps with some of the things we've talked about up to this point. Burnout, in a nutshell, it's chronic. It's a feeling of exhaustion where you're ineffective feeling from job demands. You're running on empty and it's like, I got nothing left. I'm running on fumes. PTSD, much, much more severe. You know when you got PTSD. You are not feeling okay. And you want to get help if you got PTSD. It's very specific. It's from a lot of very deep traumatic things, and it involves intrusive memories and flashbacks, and it can interfere with your quality of living and your quality of work. The secondary traumatic stress, also called compassion fatigue, or you'll hear people call this vicarious trauma. That's something in the mental health field, we deal with a lot from hearing other people, and you guys probably are at risk of that as well, taking in other people's traumatic, events over time. That can then lead to the burnout and the PTSD. Bottom line, you don't have to be fancy with these terms. You just need to know, hey, if I'm struggling, I need to get some help so I can kick this to the curb so it does not continue to accumulate and get any worse for me. All right. Sometimes I don't love the word resiliency, but I know it's the thing out there. I'm trained to do the CISM, the Critical Incident Stress Management, and have done a lot of groups with that over the years, and now they've changed that model. After 9/11, Paul Mitchell model took a rap with that, and because there was a lot of people responding to New York when the towers went down, and in the name of saying they were doing CISM and critical incident responding, they rushed to New York City and they didn't know what the heck they were doing, and there was just a lot of bad attempts to do therapy and treatment with people, and it kind of gave that CISM model a bad rap. And so out of that, at least according to the research that I've done, they now call it the resiliency model. So that's the term we're going to use here. So what the heck is resiliency? It's our ability to bounce back from adversity, right? It's our ability to handle changes day to day. It is being very adaptable, no matter what we're working with. And in a nutshell, effective self-care means increased resiliency and you function at your best. So that's what being resilient is all about. And then just some very basic ways to build resiliency. It's actually simple, it's not rocket science, and it's actually very basic things. You build strong social connections. So especially as first responders, make sure you're interacting, stay social. It helps protect you. Don't isolate and keep shoving things down deep, because that's when, remember when I told you I started to get burnout? I was isolating. I'd get ticked off if the phone rang. I wanted to be left alone, and I was starting to back away. From people. I was shutting down a little bit, and that was kind of like a danger zone for me. You got to keep practicing your own self-care. You have to develop a growth mindset. And so if you feel like you're getting in a rut with what you do for a living, reinvent what you're doing and why on earth. Revisit, why are you doing what you're doing? I've done that over the years in working in mental health. It's like, why am I doing what I'm doing? For me, it's a little bit of ministry, and you have to tap into and visit your reasons again of why you're doing what you're doing. Are you talented and gifted in this area? Do you feel that this is your calling? Is this why you're doing it? And maybe tap back into some of those things. And this is huge. Remember to focus on what you can control, and you have to also keep focusing on finding meaning and purpose day to day in what you're doing and why. We need to keep learning from past challenges. We need to embrace change and maintain positive outlooks. I know it's real easy for me to stand up here and say that, but this is where you have to get really creative sometimes and just really think outside of the box, right, with some of these real basic things. The debriefings, those are good for us. When people tend to avoid the debriefings, and if you do that all the time and things are piling up, especially for the big traumas that you've responded to, make sure that you're taking care of each other and yourselves, and that you're doing debriefings and that you're getting those. And then within 24 to 48 hours, apply periods where you're doing physical exercise, but alternate that with relaxing. Again, very simple stuff, but this is part of the things that they have proven helps to outsmart burnout. Be very, very purposeful and proactive in what you're doing to protect yourself in this line of work. Structure your time. Maintaining a normal schedule as much as you can is very helpful, they say. And then remind yourself that you're normal and you're having normal reactions. Don't label yourself as crazy. If you go through a period where it's like, oh, I am struggling and I'm thinking and feeling da 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 da, remember some of this conversation and talk to each other a little bit. And remember what I told you about, people who do truly have like full-blown PTSD or like especially panic attacks. People walking around with panic disorder, they legit think they're losing it. They really do, because it's like they can't control what's going on in here, and it's true central nervous system and physiological things happening. Same thing with PTSD. So naturally, we're going to think, I certainly must be losing it because I can't control this. That's one. If you start to think that way, just get some help. You don't have to tell anybody. You can do that very privately and confidentially so you can learn how to outsmart it and kick it to the curb. So, and you have to remember this, a lot of this stuff is your normal reaction to very abnormal events over time. Honestly, I don't think any of us were really created to, on a day-to-day basis, to take in so much stuff that we take in. You ever think about it? I don't think we were really created to do that, but we do it, right? And I commend you for what you're doing. I think about what I do, honestly. I'm an old fart. I've done this for 27 years. And I was like, I could write a book. I think I'm unshockable. I've heard so many things. And I'm like, this is not normal. So we have to fight against that, and we have to use humor, and we have to recognize that we're doing things that really we probably weren't created to do so intently on a day-to-day basis. So we got to fight like crazy to outsmart the impact that it's having on us. Be aware of anything you're doing that's numbing you from any of this stuff. Drugs, alcohol, you name it. Don't complicate what's happening to you psychologically with another issue being added, like a substance. Help your coworkers as much as possible by sharing feelings. Talk to them and be real. You might be helping someone more than you realize, but you just being real, They'll probably think, if they listen to you, like, okay, I'm not the only one. And it probably will very much help them. Give yourself permission to feel rotten sometimes and to just share your feelings with each other. No judgment zones, right? Give yourself, keep a journal, write your way through those sleepless hours. So, not a huge person with journaling. Some people love it, so I kept this in the presentation. But if you can't sleep, and instead of just laying there and, if the wheels are spinning and you're like, I can't shut it off, grab a journal, write. Do something cathartic that is like a release. Instead of just suppressing and stuffing stuff down, that's when we really stay messed up. But at least journal is cathartic. It's a catharsis. It's a release of some of the stuff you can't shut off with your thoughts, and it might help you. So I can't stress exercise enough. When I've worked with actual psychiatrists, I just work around therapists right now, but all of the docs in psychiatry that I've ever worked with, they are huge on 20-minute minimum of something aerobic. Doesn't matter what it is, even just brisk walking. Something miraculous happens when you hit the 20-minute minimum aerobic piece of activity. Endorphins kick in, and there is such a physiological positive and hormonal reaction that it's comparable to low-dose Prozac. It's like taking an SSRI. I mean, it really is. So it's kind of a win-win. So, and then I've just got a breakdown here, stress and hormone regulation. It definitely lowers our cortisol, which is a real thing. It can help keep us out of the fight or flight response from a lot of accumulation of responding to stressors over time. Mood enhancer, increases energy and focus. It definitely helps regulate sleep. It offers a mental break from work worries, and it helps with more creative thinking and mental recovery. And then it boosts overall self-efficacy, and it helps with providing social connection. If you kind of connect with somebody and say, hey, do you want to walk together or go work out, that can help a little bit there. And then one more slide here of some coping strategies. You guys have probably seen this, read this, or I don't know if you've talked about it in your roles, but there's a lot of stuff out there right now for first responders and EMT, fire, police on buddy systems. I kind of like it. This was a little newer for me when I found it. This is where responders partner together to support each other and monitor others' stress, workload, and safety. There's some good stuff. Talks about make sure that you're not just on the superficial surface, with each other. Make sure you're connecting with somebody that you're working with all the time. Keep an eye out for each other. Set up times to check in with each other and be very real. Let your walls down a little bit and talk about the reality of what you're taking in day to day. Listen and share experiences and feelings. Acknowledge tough situations and recognize accomplishments. Make sure you're celebrating the wins. Every Tuesday we have our team meeting at the Trauma Recovery Center, and I always start out by saying who's got to win, because we do so many cases and so much therapy, and sometimes the staff just sits there staring at each other, and I'm like, come on, you certainly have a win, right? And I'm like, this is your time to shine and brag a little bit about each other. Whose life did you impact? Who did you save? I can tell you guys that you definitely are saving lives, because people come into St. V's and they're like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for, and they're always talking about, the first responders and how grateful they are. And they usually say things like, I so wish I could get a hold of them. I don't even know their names, but they old and young, on those trauma units, they just so wish they could write you guys letters or get a hold of you and just thank you. I think some of them want to just squeeze you to death too. They're just so grateful, that they're alive and they were rescued. So also monitor each other's workloads, encourage taking breaks, share opportunities for stress relief. Make your buddy feel safe to speak up and to share. Everybody needs that, right? And I know it sounds so hokey, but make sure you got a buddy. We have to do that for each other. All right, and then I just put some of the main coping things up here. Get support from professionals. I'm not trying to, sell you coming to the TRC or anything, but I did put some of our brochures here in my cards, and I sincerely mean this. I don't know why, but I have a passion for you first responders, and if you guys are ever in a pinch and it's like, you don't know where to go and you want to run something by me and I don't know what your insurance panels are, call me. I left my business cards there. You won't bother me. I'll call you back if I can. I have a way of, I know who's good in the community. I know not everybody is close to St. V's, or you might be Waterville, White House, all over the place. But call, use the TRC if you want as just a resource. I can help connect you or your family with people that I know are really good in the community. There's a ton of therapists in places out there where you can go, but get support. EMDR and cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive processing therapy are the three best modalities of treatment for PTSD and first responder stress. Very, very effective. And here's the cool thing, you don't have to be in therapy forever. Sometimes 4 sessions or less with EMDR, very effective. Several people on my team, I'm trained in it, several people are very effective. We've worked with some Gulf War veterans, other first responders, have had a lot of success with EMDR. Not everybody wants to do EMDR, but CBT, very effective also. And again, you should not have to be in therapy forever. Just because you get symptoms of PTSD, if you're working with someone who knows what they're doing, a few sessions and boom, you're usually feeling better, and you will find a reduction in those true central nervous system reactions that you're having. Talked about the exercise. I love this. Get a pet. If you're knocking at the door of burnout, make sure you got a pet. You know why? They just love us unconditionally, right? And they don't talk back to us, but it does something for us. We've talked about journaling. Make sure you are taking vacations. You got to get away, get crazy, have some fun. You got to let your hair down, get away from talking about what you do for a living, and blow off steam. You have to do what we call purposeful release. Okay? Sometimes when people come in and see me or somebody on my team for therapy, sometimes people are just stuck, and it's not because they're lacking intelligence or they're a bad person or anything. They legitimately just don't know what to do. They're just stuck. They don't know how to, get unstuck sometimes. And a lot of times, honestly, with people, it doesn't take any real fancy therapy. Sometimes people just literally need to empty their vessel from the accumulation of stress over time that has been building, and that is causing a lot of their symptoms. You got to make sure you're balancing priorities, and you know what? Avoid big crowds. If you're struggling and stress has been building, stay away from big crowds. It usually irritates you more, and it actually makes your stress higher. Start something bigger than you. This is where you got to think outside of the box, find purpose and meaning in the world and in life. What can I do? Look into charitable things to do. Get off of yourself, and no offense, but I always tell people, especially people I work with who are depressed, that they need to find something and someone that is hurting worse than them. And you wouldn't believe it, it's like a magic pill. When people invest time and effort, even though they don't feel like they've got much energy, but they get off of themselves and they invest into something or someone who has a bigger need, it's very, very healing, very therapeutic. So also make sure you're maintaining healthy boundaries. It's okay to say no. You're already first responders, right? You're doing so much. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're putting your foot down and you're saying, you know what, I just can't do it all. It's okay to do that. Practice breathing and relaxation techniques. I know this sounds hokey, but there's a lot of research out there. You can be driving around, right, in your squad and just, it's incredible. When you take that deep breath in and you hold it for a few minutes and slowly blow out like you're exhaling through a straw, you're literally affecting your central nervous system in such an effective way. You're lowering BP, and you're bringing down heart rate. And especially if you just came from a high intense where you got adrenaline running, do some of that deep breathing stuff. It can actually help really lower blood pressure and help with stress levels there. So I put together this little slide for you. Here's the secret weapon to protecting yourself from burnout. The vessel that you reside within has to release more pressure than what you're taking in. So I want you to think about that. I looked for some pictures where there was a fulcrum of some sort, or I wanted to show two containers where there were arrows filling one container up, but I wanted to show arrows coming out. So this was the best thing I could find. But remember that, we really weren't created to take in so much pressure on a day-to-day basis. So when you're exposed to a lot of stuff, if you're just taking it in, picture yourself like a vessel, like a container. This is when panic disorder happens to people. I've actually, I'm really passionate about people who have panic disorder. I've really studied that. And if you got panic attack, people send them to me. I love working with them because they can get on the other side of panic attacks. You can literally kick panic attacks to the curb. What they've proven with panic disorder is the accumulation of stress over time that does not get released. Most people who have panic attacks are overachievers. They're very successful people. They're very high achievers. And they're very good at taking in, signing up, saying, I'll do it. You're the go-to person, but they never let loose. They never let go. And the accumulation of an abnormal amount of stress over time literally eventually hits the body to where it's like, it blows. And then it usually surfaces in a physiological reaction with true panic symptoms. And it's a true physiological reaction. So make sure, and this is so true, the secret weapon to protecting yourself from burnout leading to PTSD and anything else is you've got to be releasing more than what you're taking in. You got to get creative with this one. You got to find a way that works for you. Not everybody is going to smell lavender and go to a massage. Those things are a little too frou-frou for me. That doesn't work. I have to do physical things. So, and I'm not putting those things down if it works for you, but you got to find that thing that speaks to you. Some people have to get flat out physical. They have to go and shred something, tear it apart, burn something, destroy something. And if you have to do that for 10-15 minutes, like in a rage and let loose, if that works, do what you got to do, right? Okay, and for your department, I just had to put this in here. This should be posted for all of you somewhere in your departments. And it should just be a sign that says this: if you or anyone you know needs help or is considering suicide, and you should have this suicide prevention number available. You should also have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline website there so people can maybe scan that or tap into that if they need to. Maybe post a variety of counselors in your area that are on your insurance panels. Again, call me if you ever have any questions. You don't have to see me, you don't have to come to St. B's, but I'll help you find therapists who are on your insurance panel and give you some few names for your department, and just have those people listed and their phone numbers. And make sure you're planning something fun, different, and not related to work so that you can blow off steam and team build. Get away and get crazy. You got to be able to let your hair down, right? And then here's our contact information. Mercy Trauma Recovery Center. We're in the main portion of the hospital on the second floor. And again, I sincerely mean it. If you guys ever have any questions, or if you want to run something by me and get some direction, it's very confidential. I'm not going to tell Sean just because I know him, or, you know, it's not going to be shared with anybody. You've got confidentiality. So that's all I have, and I just wanted to know if you guys, anybody want to share anything, or I don't know, anything helpful that you want to share with the group.